Sixth meeting of the AMATS Technical Advisory Committee to order. It is 1 p.m. Aaron, if you could do the roll call and also the public involvement announcement, please.
So of course, thank you. Sorry, just checking to see who's online real quick while we wait. Okay, member Umatum and member Dwad are excused. Member Alimi.
Present.
Member Lindemood.
Present.
Member Gamble for member Keegan.
Present.
Member Boland.
Here.
Member White.
Here.
Member Coy.
Here.
Member Rudolph. Member Kohlhaas.
Here.
And then member Babb.
Present.
Okay, you do have quorum. And for the public announcement, welcome to the AMS Technical Advisory Committee meeting. Public comments are welcome and encouraged, with 3 minutes given to each speaker. After the committee discusses each item, members of the public will be invited to comment. Housekeeping items. For virtual attendees, please keep your cameras off unless you are speaking. For those attending by phone, press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. AMATS committee meetings are audio recorded and posted on the AMATS YouTube page. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Do we have a motion for approving the agenda? Moved by member Lindemood, seconded by member Boland. Are there any changes needed to the agenda? Okay, are there any objections to approving the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Next item is the minutes from June 11th, 2026. Do we have a motion for approving the minutes?
To approve the minutes.
Moved by member White,
Second.
seconded by member Kohlhaas. Are there any changes that are needed to the minutes? Hearing none, are there any objections to approving the minutes?
I'd like to abstain because I wasn't here.
Okay, sounds good. Do we do the abstain by a voice call or?
No, we can just note that she's abstained and objections.
Okay. Are there any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved with member Babb abstaining. The next item on the agenda are our action items. 5A, AMATS funding program tip admin mod number 8. Is that yours, Aaron?
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for this today. You have before you tip admin mod number 8. So another one. You want to know Bart Rudolph just joined us.
Okay, let the record show that Bart Rudolph joined us at 1:03 p.m.
Sorry, just making notes on it. So this admin mod before you is a very quick, simple admin mod. AMAT staff has received a request for making a change to one of the projects in the tip. It's on the table 5, congestion mitigation air quality project. It's CMAQ 00018, the downtown transit center. So the request was to replace 15 million of AMAT's STBG, or surface transportation block grant. So that's our primary funding source, with state CMAQ funding. So as you recall, earlier this year, AMATS had sent a request over to Alaska DOT, the commissioner's office, for use of some of their state CMAQ money for the downtown transit center. We never received an official response, but we did get a request from DOT headquarters staff to go ahead and initiate the transfer. I have asked for an official response in writing to confirm that that funding is available. I still have not received that. I'm hoping to receive that before the policy committee so we can verify that the funding is actually available. However, at this time, staff still recommends that this admin mod be approved in anticipation of that funding being officially made available. Just as a note that if the state CMAQ funding is not available officially, formally finalized, the project will not be unfunded. We will still go ahead and be able to fund it with AMAT's STBG funding. So this is before you, and staff's recommendation is to recommend to the policy committee approval of this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
Under the scenario that you mentioned that CMAQ's not available and go back and fund it with what we originally planned on, what doesn't happen when that happens.
I mean,
Well, that funding would be spent on something else. So what's the intention of that funding that would replace the CPAC funding if it's not available?
oh, the 15 million of the STBG.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no time to utilize that fund in this fiscal year. We are at the end of the fiscal year. We have like a month and a half left before the federal system closes.
Got it.
So it can't be spent on anything else, so it'll carry forward to a future year.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, questions or comments?
If that funding does not materialize, there have to be another admin mod in order to recognize that fact.
And we will do that in August and see where we land. And if it doesn't make it in time, then we can work on figuring it all out as part of the 27 through 32 and dealing with the amendment. That's why I'll put it out there. It's important to get these kind of responses in a timely fashion and get these changes done before the end of the federal fiscal year.
Other questions or comments? Okay, are there any comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, it's back to the committee. What is the will of the committee?
Move and that the policy committee approve the admin mod number 8. Contingent upon receiving information from DOT about the availability of the funding.
Motion by member Bab. Do we have a second?
Can you say receiving confirmation is what you said?
Second on the motion? I heard member Boland second it. I saw your hand, but
okay.
yeah, second by member Boland. Are there any discussion or changes to the motion?
So I would ask, does it need to be contingent? Because Aaron, did you mention that it would be good to move forward regardless?
So this puts it in if the confirmation from DOT is not provided, then it could be up to the policy committee to say, we're not approving the admin mod 8 and we're going to leave it as is, which is fully funded by STBG.
Which means there wouldn't need to be another amendment later. If the funding wasn't available.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a slicker way of doing it than
Nice.
what I was thinking.
okay, that's why I was trying to marry up the two ideas.
Mhm.
Thank you.
The policy committee can choose to do what they want to do either way, but this would express the tax perspective that we really want that verification. Or and what's accomplishing. Any other discussion or amendments? Okay, hearing none.
Sorry, I have a question from staff. Receiving confirmation from DOT about the availability of funding. Do you want that before the policy committee meeting? Do you want it at the policy? Do you want like a timeline set there for it?
I think by the time of the policy,
I mean, if the
applicant is okay with that.
I mean, the policy committee could vote to approve it contingent upon receiving it at a future date.
Yeah.
Could they not? It wouldn't matter if it was received by the date or not.
Well, we can make the recommendation, and my recommendation personally would be that they get that information before the next meeting. But then they could decide to do whatever they like.
That's all I was trying to just get clarification. Is, are you expecting it before the next meeting or just?
Okay,
By
the next meeting. And the second is good with that?
No.
Okay,
Sounds like a good judge.
sounds good. So consider that a friendly amendment incorporated into the main. Are there any opposed to the motion? It's friendly amended. Okay, hearing none opposed, that motion is approved. Let's see. Oh, I see I do have a hand up line. Maybe it's after the fact. Just one of you want to call on. For a little.
We've made the motion.
Yeah, we've finalized everything, so we have moved to the next item.
Okay, sounds good. Sorry about that, Lauren. The next motion, the next item on our agenda is the recreational trails plan. Recreational trails plan approval. Is this,
This is not me. This will be with the project manager and the consultant. So we can
Okay.
turn it over to Nico. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Nico.
Hi, Nicola Dent. I'm a park planner at Anchorage Parks and Recreation. This is Taryn Olsen-Yell. She's the lead consultant on this project with Varna Consultants. And yeah, so having us the last time we were before this committee, we had just kicked off a public comment period for the recreational trails plan. And so just a little bit of background of where we are, how we got here. Parks and Recreation was tasked with updating the 1997 Area West Trails Plan. And this came about from the AMAT's non-motorized plan update 2022, recommended a separate effort really focused on recreational trail systems and how those connect and the management and maintenance of those trails over the next 10 to 20 years. So that is what this plan focuses on, and it is meant to be a complement to the non-motorized plan, which focuses on sidewalks, pathways, on-street projects that you're all very familiar
Hold a second. Member Amatum has joined us now.
okay, let the record show that at 111, member Umatum joined. Promotion. Sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, the recreational trails plan complements the non-motorized plan, but they have different scopes. Next slide. So our process, our public engagement process spanned about 2 years. It included 2 advisory groups, online engagement tools like an interactive comment map and an online survey with thousands of comments through those efforts. We hosted a total of 4 workshops, 2 in Anchorage, 2 in the Eagle River area. And the common themes and the common priorities we heard through all these public engagement efforts were 3 things. The first, to improve trail safety. Second, improving trail maintenance and also addressing sustainable funding for that maintenance. And third, connectivity. So connecting our existing trail systems really. So these 3 things really guided where our plan ended up, and we've consistently heard them over the 2 years. And I just want to point out that there's this interesting tension that we heard between this focus on taking care of what we have and maintenance, and also connecting the existing amazing systems we already have. So I think you'll see in the draft that we are addressing that tension, and we got a lot of comments during the comment period kind of asking more about that. So how our recommendations look in the plan in these 4 categories. First, we have recommended trail projects. So these are both new connections and upgrades to existing trails. We've updated and introduced a set of trail classifications that also includes a class 6. So this is a new type of standard for the municipality that would be a kind of high use, high volume greenway trail or paved trail that separates users such as bikes from pedestrians using surface treatment. We've also created a list of non-motorized projects because we did hear, although this plan really is meant to focus on recreation, we heard a lot about non-motorized projects and connectivity and how to get in between parks. And we also have a series of system-wide recommendations and implementation tools that help us, that would be guiding principles for our department to carry out these recommendations.
Sorry, if there's something going on in the background, can we recognize that Linda has had to leave?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, let the record show that Kate Duber is stepping in for Brian Lindemood at 1:14.
Oh, yeah, it's really good. Okay, next slide. It's the one Trinity has. So I did want to show this slide because I think, again, to address that like balance between the new kind of taking care of what we have and these new projects that people are asking for. This is how our trail project recommendation list looks, broken down by type of project. So about 2/3 of our projects are to improve existing assets. About 1/3 of these projects are new trail construction or new assets. But that does look different when you look at the Anchorage Bowl versus Eagle River and Chukiak. So in the Anchorage Bowl, where we already have a lot of things built out and we are more connected, the majority of the projects are improvement projects. And then in Eagle River, where there's a bit less connectivity and fewer assets, there's more new projects. So that does kind of make sense, but I just wanted to visualize that. And just some highlights of our trail project recommendations. We've received a lot of interest and feedback on the Class 6 or the widening effort on these, our busiest trails in the Anchorage Bowl, so the Coastal Trail and the Chester Creek trails. We've also, received a lot of positive support for some of these big dream connectivity projects that have been in public documents and planning documents for decades and decades. So we did carry these ideas forward, such as the South Coastal Trail and the Muldoon Perimeter Trail. Since the public draft, we did modify these routes based on stakeholder consultation and just public comment to, kind of emphasize that we're wanting to use parkland where we can, green belts where we can, and making these corridors, they're very conceptual in this plan, and we recognize that they will require a lot of further study. We just want to acknowledge that. And this is a visualization of that Class 6. So those widening projects are referring to standards such as this, where you're using striping or different surface treatments or medians to separate different types of users. Bikes and pedestrians is how it's used a lot all over the world, and it could also be used in the winter for skiing and other types of uses. So our non-motorized needs list is a separate map in the plan. It's not prioritized the same way our trail projects are, because we're recommending that these get carried forward into future non-motorized planning efforts, because we think they're a better fit for different jurisdictions, different partners, different leads. But we did think they're really important parts of connecting the trail system, and we heard that over again. So in summary, the public review period that was between the end of January and the end of March, we received about 230 kind of individual comments or comments that we responded to, and that resulted in some changes that are detailed in a memo that was presented to you. For trail classifications and design, these modifications were minor things just to make sure our uses are best reflected in the classifications. For project recommendations, we did add 2 in Eagle River and a few onto our non-motorized needs list. And then we did kind of modify and edit our connectivity, our narrative around connectivity and the tools that would be required to carry out those big dream projects, such as land acquisition, tools that we have at our disposal. And again, since the comment period closed, we did present and to the Board of Supervisors in Eagle River and Shukiak and the Anchorage Parks and Recreation Commission. So that brings us here today. Happy to answer questions at this time.
Okay, are there questions or comments from the committee?
I'm suggesting
Go ahead.
this, but maybe I should save those for after the motion. Not sure what.
So, yeah, you can talk about what kind of things you like generic things, but any specific stuff, I would wait until you have a motion.
If you want to discuss it now, it's, a good time to ask questions or make comments, but specific edits, we'll need a motion regardless.
Okay, well, I think the one comment that I want to make is that I really enjoyed reading the plan. I think it's a great plan. So overarching my comment is thank you for.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Got a question.
Go ahead.
Was there another version that was brought to the Technical Advisory Committee? Because I looked back in my February agenda and I just saw an informational item as far as a presentation, but I don't remember receiving a copy to review. So I don't know, was the distribution made to the Technical Advisory Committee back when, or when did it come to us before?
So I think our at the beginning of February, we would have posted our public review draft. So that would have been available, was available to everyone online.
Yeah, I don't recall if it was a specific attachment.
Yeah.
For your TAC agenda.
Yeah.
So I remember getting a nice little brochure with a fold out showing the
Yeah.
different trails. But So sorry, I didn't do my homework to review, and I did have a chance to review pretty thoroughly today before this meeting. But I have kind of a collection of comments, and I'll be maybe even seeking delay and moving it forward. And finding out if there's opportunity to have more of a work session or more time to interact with our different departments, and especially because there's a lot of overlap on kind of this in-between area.
Yeah.
And I know connectivity is so important, but I also agree it was pleasant to read. I enjoy the graphics and how easy it is to move through it and understand it. It's interesting and it's good work, so appreciate all that.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or comments from the committee? So I have a few questions on the new class 6 trails. If some of the surface, like just being a biker, skier, runner, and having been in Minneapolis and seen some of how they do it with the separated trail system, and knowing some of the winter challenges that we have with grooming versus clearing, kind of all of those questions. There's this, I have wondered, like, is there a chance to have paved trail that could be groomed could be cleared, I should say, in the winter next to groomed skiable trails in the winter? So it looks like in this case, they're like both paved, and I know this is a plan, so I'm just wondering like some of those decisions that might come to implementation, because it can be a lot more expensive to pave, right? We have a lot of trails like through Far Northwest Centennial Park that are not paved, and a lot of our ski trails are not paved, and it's easy to groom them. So do you have thoughts on kind of that specific question and how that might come into play when projects are making decisions?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that is a successful model in other places for sure. So we did, I think our class 6 is an A and a B. So the A is just a wider path. That would be implied that it's all the same surface, and then the B, class B, is the parallel path. And I do think, you know, with these class 6 recommendations, it is going to make a lot more sense that we're doing them alongside a site plan or a master plan, where like we're considering everything around those assets, because we're not just going to be able to point blank say, okay, let's go widen like that section. It's gonna take a lot more coordination, and I think at that time is maybe when more of that detail might come out, and you know, maybe budgets would also certainly affect those decisions. But I think by including the class B, 6B, excuse me, we the intent is to provide that different level of training.
We'll just add that there is summer classifications and winter classifications, and they don't always necessarily compound on each other. So a summer class 2 doesn't necessarily mean it's a winter class 2, because of our, like, vegetation is different. Summer and winter, what you're able to groom could be wider versus what that summer tread is. So there's more opportunity, not just with the class 6, but with other higher classification trails where those conversations could come into play a little bit more. But yeah, like Nicolette said, that class 6B is really the prime opportunity, and is intended to open up the discussion to have the multi-winter maintenance option.
Yeah, because I don't know that, I'd have to just check it. I wasn't sure if it said only paved in the 6B or not. That's a good question.
Okay, and then the second question that I have is, if we are implementing new bicycle corridors on our street system, i.e. neighborhood greenways, which we kind of started doing recently. This is year 2 that we're doing it. And there are key connection points onto our trail network, which our trail network is amazing, and we're trying to like integrate all of those together. And I see in this plan maybe some of those, but I don't see a lot of those. Like, how would we move forward with whether something gets prioritized or not, if it serves maybe in more than just the recreational trail need, but it serves kind of this key connection need between neighborhood greenways and our trail network. And maybe part of the question is, if it's shown as the low priority here, but in our opinion, that connection as a higher priority because of this connection, not from just the rec trails, but for other things. Is there an issue? Can it be overridden? Is it a thing that the plan needs to be updated? Like, can you speak to some of those pieces?
Great question. And honestly, I think you hit the nail on the head of one, maybe the biggest struggle we've had through this whole process is really trying to set a limit on what that scope is. You know, how far do we take our recommendations? Overall, this plan, it's an AMATS plan. This covers the whole AMATS area. That's why we're here, you know, seeking approval from this body. But it's really intended to be more of a guide for the Parks and Recreation Department first, and then identifying those projects where we are going to rely on partners a lot, or maybe AMATS funding could be used to implement kind of these bigger dream recreation projects. And so that's kind of the lens overall, is that it's primarily a program guide for Parks and Rec. But even our priority guidelines, that high, medium, low, it's not a marching order necessarily for the projects that need to get accomplished in that order. They're really just intended to say, these are where we've identified severity of need. We know there's, for example, existing condition projects, huge potholes or degrading bridges, things like that, where we know it's more time sensitive. It also takes into consideration whether or not the resource is entirely within the Parks and Recreation Department's control. Is it all on parkland, or do we need to work with multiple partners to do it? And so I think that's really the crux of this. Is intended to complement other departments and other agencies like right-of-way projects in the neighborhood green belts. This is really to document our public need, the department needs, and it should be seen as a tool to maybe help bolster that argument, help make decisions for this body and municipal and state departments for what projects to fund. So our goal is that it all works together, and the need to make an amendment to this plan, I would say no, unless there's like a really significant project that's not included in here that we missed. But this is the 20-year guide. We haven't updated the recreational trails plan, and it will be 30 years next year. And so we wrote it with that longer, more comprehensive lens than the short-term funding.
I do have a related question to that specific topic. So this is intended to replace the 1997 area
Correct.
trails plan, correct? But that is a element of the comp plan.
Also correct.
So are you intending to have this plan adopted into the comp plan and the other removed?
The
as part of
way,
this process?
that's a great question. And I think the answer is that it's still up for discussion, and that is something we'd be interested in hearing the committee's perspective on, as well as the policy committee. This is really part 2 of the non-motorized plan, which also did not go before the assembly for formal adoption as an element of the comp plan. And so at this moment, the plan is to stick to that, the AMATS model, and stay here, but definitely has been a discussion with the Parks and Rec department, with our team, with AMATS, about how far to take it. I mean, personally, would love to see it advance that way, but under the same umbrella, want to note that it's also not the intent of this plan to supersede any of the trail recommendations in district plans. So there's a lot of those neighborhood and district plans that have put a lot of very detailed thought into trail development. And a lot of those trails that are recommended, especially in like the hillside area where it's beyond the Parks and Recreation Service area, those did not get folded in to this plan because it's kind of beyond the scope of where we're focusing recommendations for funding. And so, again, not to supersede, not that those recommendations go away at all. This is to complement.
The problem I'm seeing with that scenario, just from the planning perspective, is that, you know, if you adopt this internally as an AMATS Parks Department plan, and it's intended to replace the area-wide trails plan, the area-wide trails plan is still in effect technically, and we would still be, you know, looking at that plan as a guiding document for other projects, for other departments. So I think I do see a little bit of a conflict there, and you know, taking the area-wide trails plan out of the comp plan and not putting this into the comp plan is an option as well. So it's not an adopted element, and it's not regulatory, but it would still provide some guidance for decision making for the departments and coordination. So just a couple things to consider, but if this is intended to replace the area-wide trails plan, then I might make a recommendation that it, at least the area-wide trails plan be removed from the comprehensive plan, just to eliminate that conflict between the two. If that
Did
makes sense.
the, yeah, so the like trifecta of plans that have now been placed or are intended to be replaced, the bicycle plan, the pedestrian plan. My understanding is the bicycle and the pedestrian plan went into the non-motorized plan. But I don't know, I guess if those two have been also part of, also adopted into the comp plan, the same way that this plan was.
And they have not been.
Okay.
The problem is it gets to, that's beyond AMAT staff, because that's a muni thing. So, you know, we do up to the point that we can, and then we can assist the muni in any changes they want to make by providing the documentation. But if there's more additional work, that kind of falls outside of what we as AMATs typically fund with either our PL funds or the TIP funding that we have. So I think you need to have a discussion about what you guys want and then what can we assist with.
So that would be a discussion with Parks Department and planning perhaps. And some of the other departments involved. After that.
One of my topics too about the superseding and how it's discussed in the plan, so it's one of my items, so.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just surface kind of just hearing it being viewed more as like guiding the Parks and Rec department by EMATs. There's just kind of in my mind kind of a little bit of a discrepancy from kind of that idea. If this is an EMATs plan, but it's guiding the Parks and Rec. Yeah, anyway, just I have just a little bit of concern with kind of that idea, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say that it is primarily a Parks and Rec guide first, because it's a recreational trails plan and most of those resources are managed by Parks and Rec, managed or maintained. I guess I'll throw that out there too. There's plenty of trail assets that are not on municipal parkland, but are maintained by Parks Department. And so, yeah, I think the beauty of this being an AMAS plan is that it really does take that broader step out. So we can talk about those connections that we know we need partners on. We know we need traffic and PM&E in order to create the experiences that the recreators really want to have. Nobody works in isolation here. And I think that's really why this is surfaced and supported by AMAS from the beginning.
Definitely see a lot of value with those connections, and with the neighborhood greenway initiative that we're doing, it does build on connection between non-motorized on trail and non-motorized on street. And so that might be an area too that if this does get like delayed or considered, having at least some commentary in here about the neighborhood greenways, how that plays in. I could see a lot of value to that. What extent that gets incorporated in. I mean, that program is growing, so my hope would be that there would be flexibility to be able to account for it, even if it was just a slight change where it was even commented on, because I did a search, I didn't see neighborhood greenway in here at all. I know it's new, but I do know my staff last year did bring up neighborhood greenways. So seeing this, part of me is like, well, if we're putting all this effort into the neighborhood greenway system and it's connecting to our parks and our trails, like, why isn't it reflected at all? So I do have kind of that disappointment. But all in all, rec trails and trails in general are definitely a defining characteristic of Anchorage that this is like overdue and very, very valuable.
We have a comment from a member of the public. Can you all please just make sure to speak up when you're talking, as it is a little hard to hear on. Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments from the committee?
I have a question for AMATs, as far as fundability for connection pieces, because it did reference some of the ongoing work of trail connections and the network. What about for park, trails that are just looped within inside, like soft trails? Is that something that's fundable? I'm just trying to think of if all of the work that's identified or some of the mapping that's shown in the plan is there a limit to what could be funded as far as recreational trails from AMAS perspective?
Well, from the
What are
federal,
things that we would look at?
the federal side doesn't really recognize the terminology recreation anymore because they look at it as the transportation system as a whole. So it used to be back in the day, no, we couldn't fund recreational things unless and there's a rec trails program that DOT manages and stuff like that. So there is some aspect there. But last I checked with FHWA, by and large, our funding is flexible enough that we could cover most everything. I think you get into problems if you're talking about like single track trails. There may be some issues there, but I think by and large, most of what is in the plan can be funded in some way, shape, or form. But it again speaks to the importance of partners. We may not have the funding, but others can come in with the funding and help assist with the plan.
Because I see the master plans are identified and that'll show both things. Those things that'll happen just in isolation of the park itself, whether it's just a loop, here or connectivity to other parts of the network. That's why I asked the question.
Other questions or comments?
I guess on a positive comment, again, from PMD's perspective, we're excited to see this help inform the DCM update. So PME is working together with all the other departments for the different various chapter updates, and this is going to be great to fold that in, especially the different typologies of your trails. The other thing I wanted to note is it was mentioned on the trail review. There's also an ongoing interest with PME working with planning to take a look at the CSS process and maybe finding out if there's things that would strengthen that process. So we would invite all of this type of collaboration.
Yeah, and that actually loops back to the conversation about the area-wide trails plan, because the CSS process would require us to reference that plan for future projects, not this plan.
So does your subdivision code.
Yep.
Other questions or comments? Okay, we'll do comments from the public. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment?
You have some people.
I see two online. If others want to raise your hand while we're listening to these two, you're welcome to, but we'll start with Stephanie Mormello. If you can state your name and you'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Stephanie Mormello. I have two minor edits. For on page 118, the Hyder Street Corridor Improvements Project, it's listed as the non-motorized project number 220, and it should be number 222. I know this because I've been doing some research on another project of looking at connections down to Ship Creek, and just wanted to note that edit on page 118. And also, just an overall comment on the references to the non-motorized plan. It doesn't list the year, and I know that those plans can be updated pretty regularly depending on cycle. So it might not hurt to list when you reference it on page 115, saying where these projects come from, to say the 2021 non-motorized plan. Just so it is, because those project numbers could change in future plans as things get removed and modified. So those are my two minor edits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Next, we have Alexa Dobson.
Thank you, Alexa Dobson, Executive Director of Bike Anchorage. We want to thank the Parks and Rec Department and consultants for putting this plan together. We think it looks pretty great. Priorities definitely in the right place there, focusing on kind of maintaining and increasing connectivity within our trails. One piece that I did want to pull out and talk a little bit more specifically about was the additional kind of higher trail classifications. With the intention of creating more space on some of our busier trails. This is something that we've heard about a lot, and I think the best way to kind of put some data to that is our Bike to Work Day statistics. So we run Bike to Work Day, and every year we have volunteers go out to standardized locations and count the people who are biking on our trails. In 2022, we counted 3,361 riders. This year, we counted 5,793. And that number has been going up consistently year over year. So we really do need to have extra space in some of those more popular areas so that people have the ability to get around comfortably, especially since people are starting to ride like cargo bikes, pull trailers with their kids, or in some cases I've seen with their dogs in them. We really need to have that space there so that everybody can enjoy those trails and have a great time out there and that it's safe for everybody. So that was just a piece that I really wanted to emphasize. We need that space. And, thanks again to the Parks and Rec Department for working on this. Our trails are really such a special thing about Anchorage, and we hope that we can continue investing and prioritizing in them in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alexa. I don't see any other hands online. Any other public comments? I don't see any hands in the room. It is back into the committee. What is the will of the committee?
I move to delay in moving this forward to recommend it to the policy committee for an opportunity for multiple department engagement with the project team and the Parks Department to answer some questions and then maybe kind of get a little bit more clarity. There were a couple areas that I'd like to discuss further. Maybe I'll stop there.
Suggestion. Can move to postpone it to a date certain and to have a work session.
Okay,
That would be
good.
Can speak to that maybe after we finalize the motion.
Yes. Okay.
Okay,
I'll
so
change my motion.
it's still in process.
Second.
It doesn't have a second yet, so
Yeah, so
Okay.
you can adjust it as much as you
Okay,
want.
so how do I say that? I move to postpone action on this item to
Date certain.
what date do you want to choose?
like August, the August meeting, in order to have a work session to discuss comments.
The August TAC meeting. Okay. To session.
The motion has been made by member Kohlhaas, seconded by member Bab to postpone that decision until the August meetings and have a work session beforehand. Are there any discussion or amendments?
I just want to speak to that motion if you don't mind.
Please.
I think that this project has been in process for 4 years now.
Not quite, but close.
Coming up.
It's definitely reaching its final stages and I hate to see it postponed. Definitely. So I'm hoping that we can use the work session as the opportunity to give departmental feedback. I also have a list of minor items, but it's kind of all. So maybe this will provide us all the opportunity to share those suggested edits with you, give you the departmental feedback, maybe discuss the comp plan complication a little bit, and then bring this back next month and hopefully to recommend approval. Definitely.
Okay, thanks. Are there other discussion or amendments?
Is this a work session with the TAC and PC or just the TAC?
I would prefer both. We can all look at it together. I mean, it is such an important plan so that everybody has an opportunity to engage with some of the discussion items.
Wait, so I'm
Would
just
that
gonna,
work?
well, I'm just gonna point out where we're at timeline wise, so everybody is keenly aware of what it means. So as this is just a recommendation of the policy committee, we'd have to wait until the policy committee meeting to determine if a work session were held. That is July 16th. If they approve for a work session, that means we have to schedule the work session, which would mean sometime the week of the 20th, we would get the information. We would have to post it that week if we got the information soon enough from everybody to have the meeting the week of the 27th. We have to post for the TAC the week of the 27th.
So trying to get it all done by August doesn't give us much time. It sounds like that's a little bit of a Herculean effort.
If you're wanting to involve like include like departments from the muni to come and participate, I'll be honest, we may, from my standpoint, that's not achievable to give you guys the time and to get everything ready.
Okay,
and to
let's,
make it
I will
worthwhile.
retract that then. Let's
September.
focus on just a work session with the,
Or we could do it September 3rd is the TAC meeting if you want to do September instead of August, and that gives you much more time. It gives you like a full month to get everything ready and have that engagement. And then still gives you that certain date of when it needs to be done by.
so we would postpone it to the, did you say September?
September TAC meeting.
TAC meeting?
Postpone to a date certain, September
Do
3rd.
we have a second? Did somebody second the motion?
I did.
Member,
Okay, thank you.
So did I second your amendment?
I think you can just have a,
Amendment, okay.
Yeah.
whoever the second can make the amendment.
Yes.
So you're friendly amending it.
I accept.
And are you okay with just the TAC? I think that PC is going to be looking to us on.
That's
this
fine.
particular topic.
Let's stick with the
Friendly.
TAC because they can hear what we say and then they can have further ideas.
So TAC only for the work session?
We'll keep it
Okay.
in this
Let's see what
round.
the PC says and.
If the PC wants
they can-
to, are you saying, I mean,
This is a recommendation to them, so. Just.
I guess the nice thing about that is then we don't have to worry about their schedules. If they want to join, they can.
It makes it more flexible.
Yeah.
Okay,
We'd make it a lot more flexible.
let's do that.
Because it sounds like some of these are less on a policy level and more on some of the technical.
Well, somewhat both. I'd like to speak to my original action, the motion. So I did have a chance to go through and edit, and some of them are very minor edits. Some just nice tidying, cleaning up, and things that you probably would catch just last look through. So not worth pointing out here one by one, but it would give me kind of a chance to explain why I found some that are a little bit more than just minor edits. As far as some overall topics, I also did kind of have this kind of feeling of whose plan is this and how does it fit into the larger picture of everybody who will engage with it. It did speak to this plan is mainly a guide for the municipality, but should also support the goals of partner organizations who work on trails in the AMAS area. So again, when it's for the municipality, engaging with the other departments and how do we fit in, especially if there's different groups that are going to be involved in implementation. The other area that was created that was new is CASA, and how does that fit into kind of this inter area between the boundary, the Park Service boundary, and then getting access to trails. So I want to understand that more and then have maybe more consultation from our administration. I might reach out to them and see how do they view this as well. But I think it was like a nice catalog of everything that Parks is doing, but it almost felt kind of like a staffing plan, and which I know goes hand in hand because when you have assets, it takes staff to maintain and operate those assets as well, maintain and operate. But nonetheless, kind of there's this feeling of purview that was expressed, and it caught my attention because, is it the purview or is it not the purview? Whose plan is this? I just wanted to have a chance to sort through this, and maybe even some of those things don't need to be expressly defined. More so, this is everybody's plan. These are things that are important regardless of whose purview is it or not. That was kind of some of the tone that I was looking at. Let's see. Just things that I would like to help propose and strengthening some of the maps. Everybody loves maps. And maybe taking the tie to put the service boundary on the maps, because there was this action recommended to expand the boundary. So if they were to do that, looking at how it overlays with population figures and demographics existing, I think would be a good thing to do. I think that captures some of my main points that I hope to discuss further. But again, I think it's a really nice effort.
Okay, thank you, Melinda. Are there other discussion or amendments from the body? Yeah, as we have this, I'll definitely be thinking the neighborhood greenways. So I guess I've already, other things that I said, I see lots of value with CASA, neighborhood greenways, other things outside of Parks and Rec, this being a chance to just align all of those efforts so that it can be unified. Okay, any other discussion from the committee? Okay, it looks like we'll move then into, are there any objections to approving the motion with friendly amendments that were included? Okay, hearing none, that motion is approved. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the AMAS boundary discussion. Item 5C. Who's going to be leading that one, Aaron?
I'll start it off and then we'll turn it over to DOT. So, so this item is before you today to talk about the boundary. In the memo, we gave a quick timeline of where we're at with it or what we've done. There is a quick error on the memo. I will say that second bullet right there, the date says 11/16/2024. It should say 11/16 of 2023. So we'll correct that for the policy committee meeting. But just as a reminder, we started the boundary update in 2023. We had our first approval of the boundary January of 2024. Then we got some additional edits from DOT and FHWA in April of 24. Additionally, our CO limited maintenance boundary was going to go away a couple of months later, so we decided to wait and incorporate that into the boundary. So we brought additional edits back to the committees at their August 2024 meeting. The PC moved to revisit the boundary for further discussion to address some concerns from DOT. And then the September 2024 meeting, the policy committee discussed those concerns amongst other things and approved the 2024 boundary with no objections from any of the policy committee members. Since then, we've just had some back and forth about authority, MPO authority and other things like that. And so just waiting for that to go along. At the June 2026 policy committee meeting, there was discussion about the boundary as part of one of the informational items. And one of the policy committee members made a request to have an action item in July on the PC agenda to review and reaffirm the PC approved boundary. So staff put an action item. I will let you know the action requested is more generic on there than what the policy committee asked for. And that is to give flexibility for the committee members on what they want to do with the boundary. Staff did review all the information that we have posted on the agenda, and that information is the originally approved boundary or the final approved boundary by the policy committee. The boundary changes that were made, so the backup that went with that. The DOT letter on the boundary itself that we recently received, and the DOT maps for discussion for today's meeting. I will note that at the time of posting the agenda, the maps had been sent to us only a few hours before the agenda was posted, so staff had not had the time to review those from DOT. So we didn't have that in order to provide full feedback in the memo. But based on what we had and at the time, staff is recommending that the TAC review this information and recommend to the policy committee to reaffirm the PCA boundary approved in September 2024 with no changes. So I do want to note that since we've posted the agenda, staff had a little bit more opportunity to look at the maps from DOT, and I will note there are two errors that we want to point out. Rhiannon, can you click over to the DOT maps? One more there, and kind of scroll down just a little. So this first one is in view. So the first one is the small urban area is not shown in Eagle River as it should be, because it is an area that is in our boundary. Plus, we also note that is one of the areas that's going to urbanize in the next 20 years. We've noted that in our boundary a number of times. So that should have been included in this map as well, even if it was a point of discussion. And then if you want to scroll down a little bit more, Rhiannon. So, sorry, it's really hard to mouse over this area right here. Just kind of show your mouse this right here, this whole thing right here. So this area right here that we're trying to mouse over, but it's basically on the western side of the boundary, kind of at the beard of the moose, more or less, that juts out into the mud flats where the cursor is. This map is showing that that was an expansion made as part of the 2024 update, and that is not accurate. That was actually included as part of the 2010 update, because that was one of the changes we had to make with the 2010 update, because the census had designated that area as part of the urbanized area. So we were required to include it in our boundary. So I just want to clarify, that was not something we added this go around. That was already in the boundary. So if you're asking, where's the justification for that expansion? We didn't expand it this go around. So there is no justification in our letter that we provided. So I just want to make sure that that is known for you all as you begin this discussion here. So this item is before you all to discuss and give staff direction on what you want to do with this boundary. I think DOT was interested in going through their areas of concern and talking about it and trying to have the conversation and discuss those areas of concern. So if DOT wants to go ahead and take it over now, unless any committee members have questions or comments, it'll be up to them. Thanks.
Sounds good. Saren,
Taking a break.
do we want to continue with presentation sort of with DOT, or do we want to talk questions, comments? Like,
Maybe I can jump in now if that's all right with everybody. And we'll kind of just dive into, how wherever this takes us here. But one, this has been on the agenda here for a couple meetings now as an informational item. I think goal here with this meeting was to try and get something as an action item so that we had something to discuss, something actionable that we could take on. And I did want to say thank you to AMAT staff trying to clean up these exhibits so that we did have something in detail that everybody could dive into, and did get those to staff late, and they dove in and saw some discrepancies there on the historic boundaries that we have shown here. So appreciate them catching that. I guess the goal here, at least from my point of view, is to discuss what's being proposed by DOT. And so kind of focusing on that cyan line on the DOT figures there. The goal that we have here from DOT is taking a look at where boundary roads half in, half out, where the boundary included either parkland or refuge land that was never going to be urbanized. And that kind of covers some of the main thoughts there. There's obviously a lot more detail there in the letter there. But wanted to just take this opportunity to look through this, answer any questions. Also, Lauren Little is online, and he's been a little bit more involved in some of the detailed discussions on where the proposed boundary or DOT proposed boundary land. So I'd like to defer to her if she has anything to add or if I mischaracterized anything there.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Hi, everybody. I think I was on for policy for a couple points that I think Aaron did a really great job touching on in his item brief. But yeah, I think Luke was spot on in terms of the cyan line. Really, the biggest differences between the cyan and the red, which is the AMAT's approved boundary, is removing the incursions into parkland. Those are areas that cannot be urbanized without legislative action at the very least. And then again, on the southern end, the expansion on the Seward, you know, the letter kind of touched on that. Keeping that to the urbanized area because again, the land's adjacent other than where the federal urbanized boundary, which is the blue hatch, you know, that would not be developable land. That's all refuge, parkland, etc. So I think that's the main theme. Most of what we show different with the cyan is simply removing areas that from the DOT's perspective, we don't see how those could ever be reasonably developed. And to Aaron's point on the small urban area, there's different thresholds of urban area in the federal census and in the federal highways rules of how funding is allocated. MPOs are responsible for the urbanized area, the blue. There are also these small urban areas. Eagle River's one. I believe there's one in Juneau. There's one down in Kenai Soldotna area. Those have funding set aside for them under the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, but the state DOT administers those funds. They're not. They don't go to the MPOs like the areas of MVP, FAST, and AMATs. Those are larger, denser urban areas that trigger the requirement for the Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Lauren, can you introduce yourself for the record, please?
Oh, yep, sorry. Lauren Little, Chief Engineer with Alaska DOT and PF. And then just broadly speaking, you know, as we worked through these boundary discussions with the three MPOs, AMATS's boundary is very different from the other two MPOs. Both FAST and MVP pretty much strictly followed the UZA. Don't ask me to define that, but that's the MPO required census boundary, where AMATS is quite a bit larger than that minimum federally required. And we're not at all saying that isn't justified and reasonable, but it is quite a bit different. And in terms of seeing sort of that thought process of how these expansions have happened over time, how these areas have been chosen, we didn't have quite the same clear picture in the back and forth in the documentation. And that's sort of the point of the letter that was sent is, you know, we're not necessarily disputing these things. We just need the information that helps us go, yes, okay, this is in conformance and intent of the federal laws that establish MPOs and give them their authority.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there anything in federal law that requires us to justify our boundary when it's smaller than the max, right? Because I believe our maximum could be all the way out to Girdwood, all the way up to the valley. Do we need to justify anything in between the urbanized areas and our maximum according to the federal limits?
So the federal regulations leave it very open for the MPOs to decide how to make that determination, even when it comes to how you determine the minimum, which is the urbanized area, the UZA. They leave it open and they base it on your forecast period for what you decide for the MTP. So they keep it very broad and they allow the MPOs to decide what the justification is for expansion of the boundary above and beyond that small urban area, or the urbanized area, sorry. They even make it pretty generic on how you decide what's going to be urbanized in the next 20 years. So like that small urban area in Eagle River, the reason we show it on our map is because we're saying it's going to expand and be urbanized in the next 20 years. And that was through discussions back in the day with Muni, DOT. I don't have record on why it was included in our boundary back then. But when we looked at it this go around, we saw the growth that was happening in Eagle River. We talked to planning about it. We didn't see any reason not to include it as an area we expect to urbanize in the next 20 years. So we didn't make any changes to it, other than the small little bit that we changed in parkland, which we note in our.
And if you don't mind me asking a question, when it comes to the parkland, a lot of the parkland that is in our currently approved boundary according to the PC has been in our boundary for a long time, like much longer than just recently. So I believe it's been in for decades, some of the parcels. So I'm just wondering if DNR has expressed any concern about that over the last few decades. Has there been any issue with them being included in the boundary?
No, I cannot find record of issues with DNR. I reached out to DNR in 2024 after there was a hint from the previous policy committee chair that there were some concerns from DNR about the boundary, to ask and sit down with DNR to have a discussion about the boundary and see if they had any concerns. They said they'd look it over and get back with me, and we didn't receive any contact from DNR since.
It looks like Lauren Little has her hand up. Maybe she can provide some more detail on that.
Yeah, thanks,
Go ahead.
Luke. For the record, Lauren Little, Chief Engineer, Alaska DOT NPF. So DNR really wasn't aware of the MPO boundary or what that might mean in terms of their accepting federal funds. And so I think that was the biggest thing that we uncovered was just that lack of awareness leads to risks. And so I believe the letter simply requests that there is coordination, and we do have confirmation that parkland being in the boundary is not going to create legal compliance risks for the state or unnecessary burden on DNR in terms of their ability to do their work. We, and when I say we, it was myself, Deputy Commissioner Keith, I believe it was someone from the municipality. It might have been Graham, but don't quote me on that. It's been a couple months, but we did meet with DNR and kind of discuss at a high level what this was, where the concerns were coming from the state legal department in terms of that. But I think also fundamentally there was just the question of, the laws around MPOs were for transportation planning, and it was based on, essentially local groups, local governments are going to understand their local transportation network better and be a better entity for local network transportation planning. And is this expansion into Chugach State Park really in alignment with the intent of a metropolitan planning organization? Now, we didn't go so far as to say, pull back, you'll see our blue line, or cyan line does not take you back to the bare minimum UZA by any means. It simply says, this expansion without understanding how that's a benefit to the state and the local transportation network is problematic for us. And then back to the earlier question about, what does the federal law require in terms of justification explanation? At the end of the day, the first part of the boundary piece in law is that the boundaries shall be determined by agreement between the MPO and the governor. And that's where us all understanding the justification, the basis for these boundaries, and how that is the most efficient way for us all to deliver transportation services to these areas, transportation projects. That's the key piece that we're trying to get to here, is that understanding of how these boundaries came to be and how they benefit the public and the local transportation network.
Okay, go ahead, Member Beth.
Continue. So this boundary that exists in theory at the moment that was approved by the PC in 24, right?
Mhm.
What has changed since then that is raising these objections? Because at the time, it seems like DOT, there were a couple questions, it was revised a little bit, and then the PC adopted it. And what has changed in the meantime?
I'll take a stab at it, maybe if Lauren has any additional information, but I think just that of looking at areas that are not going to be developed in the near term, roads that are kind of half in, half out. And I think that's been kind of the focus of the effort here is, what really does make sense to DOT to include and not include. So it looks like Lauren does have her hand up.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, I think exactly what Luke's saying, and also, we had several boundaries to go through the approval process with, and it was as we worked through that we realized how different AMATS's boundary was from the other MPOs. And in terms of the background and justification that we got, it maybe wasn't quite as robust in terms of explaining the public process, in terms of explaining some of the agency coordination that we had received from FAST, for example. And so that just raised a lot of questions, and working towards the shared understanding of authorities. All of that has kind of come together in that letter that was sent to AMATS there about a month ago, I think. May 21. We just want to close the loop on this stuff and make sure we have a really clear package to provide, to the governor's office for approval of the boundary. Just having a line and some basic, we just smoothed it here. Given how much larger AMATS's boundary is than the federally required, we just want to make sure we've painted that picture really clearly, because as we know, this has implications for project timelines, delivery, the amount of coordination. When you start talking NHS routes, that's money that the state is responsible for. So we have to figure out the projects for that. We have to program those funds. All of this stuff is just extra layers, and we just want to make sure that we have a really clear explanation of why those layers are in the best interest of the transportation network and the public.
Are you good? Or you another question?
I have another question. I'm sorry.
Okay, go
I
ahead,
have to
Rebecca.
pause with my questions if anyone else wants to jump in now.
Questions? Comments? I guess maybe I'll jump in and make a comment that what we're looking to do in this meeting, as I understand it, is provide a recommendation from the Technical Advisory Committee to the Policy Committee. And that what we're trying to accomplish is that having a boundary nailed down by the governor so that it is all in place as we do our MTP and everything else, we can move forward. We're trying to find something that, for all practical purposes, does need to have DOT and the MPO on board, because without that, it's not going to the governor, and we're in a worse situation. So when we move into the motion side, some of the things on my mind would be to find areas of where we're in agreement, and where we're in agreement, start from there, and then talk about some of the other places of nuance, and then be able to hopefully come away with a recommendation to the Policy Committee. They can then maybe focus their efforts on if there's spots where there are not as strong of consensus or agreement. So that's kind of what I'm viewing our meeting do when we jump into the motions side. But
Agreed. In the next 45 minutes.
yeah.
I think I would like to just address the Safer Stewart Highway issue really quickly, because in the letter, there's a discussion of the roads that are half in, half out, or partially in. I just would like to hear from DOT if they consider that a project of regional significance or not.
I guess in terms of the boundary, the urbanized area does include a portion of the Seward Highway. So a portion of that project will be in the boundary regardless of, and it's in the cyan included boundary that we have here today.
I think if you go listen to the Policy Committee recording, you can also see some information at the end of that meeting with regards to Seward Highway project. Are there other questions or comments from the committee? Go ahead, Member Colossus.
Question, maybe a comment. So I heard that the relationship between the boundary and how projects receive federal funds within the boundary. However, my understanding of a boundary is it captures things, whether they're projects that are funded beyond federal funds, like what PMD is doing with our bond funds. We get state grant funds. And it's an ability for us to all, follow the coordination process within that boundary. So my question is the boundary really just supposed to capture what's happening just on federally funded projects? Or
I mean,
how does
technically,
that tie together?
if you're talking about how it coordinates with like the TIP and the STIP and the MTP and stuff, yeah, the focus is supposed to be really federally funded or regionally significant projects that are funded regardless. But part of our kind of mission as AMATs and MPOs in general is to have a holistic understanding of the transportation system and to coordinate with all of our partners, even on non-federally funded projects, so we know what's going on. We don't want duplication of efforts or things to just pop out of nowhere that we didn't know anything about. And so what the boundary is supposed to really be is that representation of within that area, we are supposed to be coordinating on projects regardless of funding, but it's mostly geared towards federal projects.
That helps. That's kind of where I was going with it. So with that, because of the cost of funds and the work that is going to be implemented with those funds, roadways or trailhead improvements that abut up against the Chugach State Park, having that fringe of area included, I would imagine that would be something that we would coordinate with, because it would come up with MOA projects, and then we would then work together and identify those in the whole plan and then show the fiscal constraint of everything that's going on. So that is one area that I'm thinking about. Yeah, so I don't know. There was another project that AMATS is also going to be working on in Eagle River about looking at the feasibility of an expanded trail alongside the roadway. And I don't know if the new boundary would remove that project.
You mean the new boundary that DOT, the proposed one? I don't think so, because that's on the Eagle River Road out to the Nature Center. There is a portion of it that it looks like it might remove it outside of our boundary, but we would have to look into it a little bit more. It's hard because all I have is the static map that you see in front of you. What I asked for was for the actual GIS layer, so we could have that in front of you all today, and we did receive that. We received a link to a GIS map, and it works, but we were wanting the layers so we could actually incorporate it into where our boundary currently is, so you can see the differences, and then you can see those expansions that were done as part of the 2024. So.
And then also how that ties to some of my earlier questions about, are there restrictions on AMATs being able to fund recreational trails? Because some of these recreational trails projects, again, would have connectivity that may be on the edge or the border of what's being cut off from a new boundary. So just some things to think about.
And is everyone familiar with what PASA stands for? You want to just spell it out?
I believe it's Chugach State Park Service Area. Maybe I missed an A.
Does that sound right?
Access.
Access Service Area.
Chugach. So there's definitely Anchorage citizens paying for access to the state park. So there's definitely like the question in the DOT letter that says, providing a clear metropolitan benefit the Chugach State Park. I think there is clarity because there's definitely citizen interest and funding, non-federal, just local funding. for doing that. So.
That's all I have for now. Thank you.
I was just gonna say, thanks for the heads up there on that project. We'll definitely take a look and verify that that's
Okay.
not getting, orphaned out of the, it's not on the boundary or outside the boundary with what we've got. And Aaron, thanks for letting me know too. I'm sorry, we've got some folks out of the office here this week, so
Yeah.
make sure we get you those sorry, those links aren't working. I did notice Lauren has her hand up, so I did want to refer to her if she has some information here.
Yeah, thanks for noticing that. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, just to clarify, in terms of the department and governor's relationship with AMATs and the boundary, that is specific to projects funded with federal highways and federal transit administration monies. That's the legal authority for a metropolitan planning organization. And so that is specific to FHWA and FTA funded projects as shown in the tip. Regional significance is not just any state project. It has to have an action by the Federal Highway Administration, for example, an interstate access. So it's not necessarily, you could have a very large state funded project that has no federal highway administration action that has to be taken that would not be required to be shown in the tip. It can be shown in the tip, but would not be federally required. So just wanted to provide some clarity there. I also want to provide some clarity. I think there's some misconceptions too around a boundary for an MPO is the area in which those projects must be programmed in their tip, shown in their MTP. It does not prevent other projects being done with federal highway funding. We've got lots of examples around the state of DOT taking our allocations of fundings and spending them on local roads. It's actually kind of a unique thing in Alaska that we have tremendous flexibility on what type of roads we can spend our Federal Highway Administration allocations on. So even if, let's say, that project somehow falls out of the Cheyenne line, that doesn't mean that it wouldn't still be fundable and couldn't proceed. Same with any desired improvements, for connectivity in Chugach State Park. We have the TAP programs. There's a lot of other things in terms of getting projects funded. And I think the other thing to keep in mind that we have in all of these metropolitan planning organization areas is there's sort of dual layers, right? So in addition to the funding programming required through the TIPS and STIPs, projects have to get local planning approval. That's in state law. And so that's working with the municipality of Anchorage or the Mat-Su Borough or the Denali Borough or the Fairbanks North Star Borough, among others that have planning authority that we have to go and actually get project specific buy-in as well. That kind of gets lost sometimes. A project being in fast planning, for example, doesn't mean that the borough planning commission is going to agree with it. And so there are a lot of layers, and it's just another reason why we want to be really intentional with how these boundaries are set and how they function within the framework of the federal laws and what their purposes are for. Because it's, as we all know, it takes a lot to get a project to construction and delivered to the public. And so we want to make sure we have really solid reasonings for what additional steps we've put on those projects to get them to delivery.
Thanks, Lauren. Other comments or questions from the committee?
I have a couple more questions for DOT. A couple more questions for DOT, I'm sorry. I was actually very curious about the Thunderbird Falls parking lot. Why that was shown as being removed from the boundary. I suspect maybe it was a mapping error or something, but
It's a good question, and I don't have that level of detail. And
It's right up.
it doesn't look like she's got her hand up.
Right up at the little blue dot to the left of your cursor, right there. That blue dot in there is the Thunderbird Falls parking lot.
And what's the other blue dot in the middle? Slightly down to the southwest.
I'll be honest, I don't know the map well enough. And I'll point out that is something I'm curious about because the map that we were provided and the link that you guys provided didn't actually have like a satellite view in there. So I'm wondering if there may be some missing information from what DOT provided us about, they didn't actually see what was on the ground when they recommended it being removed, that we may want to discuss as well. I'm gonna try and find what that bigger blue one is.
And then, like, and it, why remove the creek?
Eagle River or the,
Yeah, Eagle River from the boundary.
it looks like Lauren has her hands up.
Yeah, so the Thunderbird Falls parking lot, as our data shows, is part of Chugach State Park. And so that's why all of those cyan, inner things are essentially a Chugach State Park holdings. It's possible that our layer has some inaccuracies. But as you're reviewing this, just fundamentally, that was the approach that the department took in that cyan, was simply removing new incursions into Chugach State Park and then removing incursions on the Seward Highway beyond the federally required, because again, that's all parkland adjacent or refuge adjacent. So if there's mapping inaccuracies, that's that blockout may not be real, but it was blocked out because it is shown in our mapping as part of Chugach State Park.
Lauren, I did have a question for you about the Seward Highway proposed area for DOT, separate from the Seward Highway project itself. If we can scroll down to that area, Matt's boundary has included Potter Marsh for decades at this point. And that section of road from the top of Potter Marsh to the bottom of Potter Marsh, north and south, actually connects two pieces of our urbanized area. It's actually pretty difficult to get to that southern piece of the urbanized area without just going along the Seward Highway right there. So I'm very curious why that was removed from the boundary, especially since we've established that a portion of the Seward project, the Safer Seward project, will be in our boundary one way or the other.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, so again, the cyan does have continuity down to the UZA, but at that point it jumps off because again, that's entirely parkland south of there. So that would not be reasonably expected to urbanize. That would all be, recreation facilities and protected lands.
But that it removes a major transportation corridor that is intrinsically tied to our urbanized area. So I could actually see removing the parkland to the south of Potter Marsh.
Potter Valley access.
Yeah, it's from the south of that intersection.
Yeah.
And going back to the old boundary at that point, but removing that section of Seward Highway from the AMATS boundary just seems a little counterintuitive to me.
Okay, other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, let's do public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment? Give just a minute or so to see if anybody online puts their hands up. Okay, not seeing any hands. Let's move back to the committee. What is the will of the committee?
Sure.
Okay, go for it, Luke.
To move to recommend to the policy committee that we establish a working session to discuss the AMATS boundary in greater detail so that we have an opportunity to show boundary proposed by DOT and PF, along with aerial footage and additional detail.
Second.
Okay, member made by member Bolin, seconded by member Bab to recommend to the policy committee that
And you can shorten that. Let's have a working session to discuss the details.
a work session.
Yeah, I was gonna say, show the proposed boundary by DOTPF and discuss.
Can I make a recommendation as the second? Can you name the parties who would be part of that work session?
Oh, would include TAC and policy.
Okay, and do you have a timeline on?
I would hope that we could get it done in the next month for maybe an action item on September's agenda. Is that?
Yeah, it'd be similar timeline as we talked about with the earlier one, that we're running in short time of getting it on the TAC agenda. I'm sorry, but so we can get that going depending on what the policy committee recommends at their meeting. Yeah. We're just gonna have overlapping work sessions, so we're gonna do our best to get things scheduled as soon as possible.
Other discussion or amendments? I guess one discussion item from me is I would love to be able to, as part of that, figure out what we agree on and what the points of maybe questions or additional diving in that we can do so that just from a process standpoint, being able to like have an initial motion be, we all agree on this, like what are the questions where maybe there's not quite as much agreement, like member Bab commented about south part of Marsh, like what is the south boundary, or kind of the question about the little green areas inside, like if we can figure out and really focus on and identify those, that will make it a lot smoother. Because this is a complex enough question that trying to do that in committee, the whole thing could be really challenging. So
I completely agree.
I did have one question. I wasn't really clear on that might help the conversation in a work session. If I can just post that question about the boundary. Is the Glen Highway between the Bowl and Eagle River part of the DOT recommended boundary, or is it excluded from?
It is included, yes.
It
They
is
concur with us on our updated boundary.
Okay.
As I think Lauren said, most of the changes are really around the parkland and in that southern portion of Seward Highway South at the Potter Marsh area. And there's some small things. And I'll point out really quickly, there's an error on our map as well that we found while reviewing. I forgot to mention earlier. Can you go back to the map real quick? And this will be an area that just want to be direct to everybody. Can you scroll up to the very top at the Okludna area on the way out of town? We noticed it and we weren't really sure. Keep going to the east and up, very, very edge of the boundary. Yep. So see that red line at the very top eastern portion, that right there? We don't know why that changed. It's in the layer, so this is not DOT or anything. I'm not saying that. But staff can't find why it changed because we didn't recommend a change there.
so it should align with
It should align with what the previous boundary was. So it's some error. And so I want to note that, and that would be our recommendation moving forward, is to move that back to where it was in the 2014 boundary, because we don't have any justification for why it would move. And Christine spent like 2 weeks or 2 days like, what happened? There's like a ghost in the system on there. So we apologize for that error on our end. And I want to make sure I point it out on the record.
is there enough clarity, the staff have enough clarity that at the work session, we could see the 2014 was the prior boundary, the new 2024, that was previously approved, but not yet approved by the governor, and what DOT is recommending, and be able to see areas where there's maybe some discrepancy. Is that with the GIS, could that be part of that conversation?
Yeah, if we can get the GIS layer from DOT on their boundary, their recommended boundary, what we can do is I can work with Christine and we can put it into the system for everybody, get it ready, and then we can start going through each. We're gonna have to divide it into segments. I don't know how you guys want to divide it, but staff can also look at the two boundaries and say, where do we seem to be in agreement? And then we can, like you said, start there and be like, it appears we're in agreement here. Is everybody still in agreement? And then kind of go through and just kind of get that verified. We can also note where there's the disagreements and then just make sure that we have the satellite view so we can see what's there and make sure that we understand what it is we're looking at. And so we can help identify that because it's nice to say that it's parkland, but I'm like, well, what is it? What kind of park is it? Or what do we have there? Is there an existing trailhead or not? We can look at that as part of it and bring that info as well.
Yeah, that sounds like, from my perspective, would be the most helpful to provide technical feedback. Does that sound good from what DOTs?
No, I completely agree. I feel like, trying to get through this in the next 30 minutes, it's not going to happen. So I think we definitely need a more involved discussion. And yeah, there's probably still some areas where we'll have to, put it to a vote here. But if we can knock out the majority of these in a work session, that seems like a better approach to it.
Nice to have a good understanding, because the work session can't make those decisions, but it can tee us up for knowing where our focus needs to be when we do meet in September. Okay, any other discussion or amendments? Go ahead.
Would it be possible for us to put the GIS layer of the CASA boundary on there as well so that we can see how that interplays?
Yeah, if I can, I'll have to find it, but our staff can find it and we'll get it on there.
Okay.
We can have it as something to turn on.
Sure.
Other discussion or amendments?
I have a question for you guys. So I just want to verify what we're talking about here. So the recommendation of the PC is to establish a work session with the TAC and PC to show the proposed boundary by DOT and PF and discuss with a kind of overview of what's agreed upon, what appears to be agreed upon, and get that kind of confirmed up, and then have the additional points where we don't. It's kind of what we want to make sure we discuss. Have the 2014 boundary, the new 2024 PC approved boundary, the DOT and PF boundary that the cyan color. We'll have the satellite view, we'll have the CASA boundary, and we're going to get all this done in a work session and have everything ready to come back by September. Did I capture that?
That's good to me.
Sounds good. And it might be a detail, but some of this is there a disagreement? Is it more just a discrepancy between what DOT proposed boundary is and what the prior approval is, or a difference? Anyway, just a term to use maybe instead of disagreement, just difference.
Yeah.
That's we have to yet to determine if disagreement level is, okay, any other discussion or amendments? Are there any opposed to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, that motion is approved. Next item on our agenda are informational items. Item 6A, your daily journey, household travel survey presentation. It looks like we have 22 minutes left.
Yep.
That should be plenty for that, correct?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and turn this over to the consultant. Bobby, I think you are on and are going to be giving the presentation. If you want to share your screen.
Yep.
Whoever from RSG, I apologize.
You me. Okay. So I'm Bobby Wortman. I'm a consultant or a managing consultant here at RSG, and I'm joined by Yumi Ya, who works in our TMR group here at RSG. You can go to the next slide, the background slide, Yumi. So a little bit of a brief background on the household travel survey. So the household travel survey in 2025 was called Your Daily Journey, and it was conducted to understand travel patterns in the AMATS region. The last time that AMATS conducted a survey was in 2014, and this is a typical of an update cycle that AMATS conducts. And the results from this household travel survey are used to inform transportation planning efforts, to update the behavioral assumptions that are in the travel demand model, help guide policy and investment prioritizations as part of the metropolitan transportation planning process. Next slide. And I put this slide in here because we get this question a lot, especially in the age of lots of different mobility data sources out there, of what is the difference between household travel survey data and passively collected data, such as replica or streetlight data. And so for household travel surveys, we have a lot of behavioral depth, but a smaller sample. And in passive mobility data, we have really broad spatial and temporal coverage, but really little behavioral detail. So household travel surveys, they capture why people travel, like the trip purpose, the activity patterns, and the time uses that are reported and not directly inferred. It links the travel to the traveler. So things like the income, the vehicle availability in the household, the size of the household itself, and various different demographics that support market segmentation of the travel market. And it records complete trip change. So we get things like short distance trips. We get things that like walking, biking, and transit trips that passive data often misses or just doesn't capture at all. And it anchors that travel data to the behavioral pattern parameters that we then feed into the travel demand model so that we get the most accurate possible reflection of what travel looks like in the Anchorage region. And really the best possible solution for MPOs and DOTs is to use these two sources together. So use the household travel surveys to build the behavioral foundation of the analytics from the survey data, and then use the passive data to fill in spatial and temporal gaps like external trips or long distance flows that are thin in the origin destination cells from the household travel survey itself. Go to the next slide. So some of the project goals were to collect a statistically significant representative sample of travel behavior in the region, support the development and the maintenance of the regional travel demand model and other planning tools, understand the differences in travel amongst travelers and cohorts of travelers in Anchorage, and help inform future transportation planning efforts. And the study targeted or had a goal to reach 1,325 households. We fell just short at 1,163, so achieving about 88% of goal. Next slide. So just a few things on the methodology that were collected. We collected from September to December of 2025. The survey had 6 languages for participants: English, Spanish, Hmong, Tagalog, Korean, and Samoan. We used an address-based sample methodology, and it included 3 different survey modes using either your smartphone through an app, the web browser, or calling into a call center to give your travel diary. And we achieved a 1.3% response rate, and it's typical in the United States that the floor that we want to meet is 0.5%. So we're just about 3 times higher than what we would achieve in other regions, or the minimum that we would want to see in a region. Go to the next slide. So our sample plan had 4 sampling areas in that. The first sampling area is what we call the zero vehicle oversample. And this is comprised of block groups with at least 15% of households identified as zero vehicle ownership. And on the maps here, you can see those as the blue color. And then we have the hard to reach sample, and these are comprised of block groups in the sample frame that meet any of the following criteria: at least 35% of the households earning less than $50,000 per year, or at least 60% of the households identified as Hispanic or Black, Indigenous, or persons of color. And then we had the general population, and that group is in the lime green on the maps. And then we have the general population, which is the gray in this population. And those are comprised of block groups that do not qualify either the hard to reach or the zero vehicle oversample. And then finally, in the red, or the orange, sorry, we have the military supplementary sampling. So this is comprised of sampling of around 3,200 addresses in JBER that are not military barracks that supplement the ABS sampling. So the military population in Anchorage is significant. We want to make sure that we're trying to capture that travel behavior and the uniqueness of travel behavior for those persons who live on JBER themselves. And then I'm going to turn it over to Yumi to carry us through the rest of the presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Bobby.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yumi Yai. I'm a senior consultant at RSG, and I worked alongside Bobby on this household travel survey project. So I'll walk us through a few highlights from the survey results. First, we collected responses from 1,163 households, which represents more than 2,300 persons. With new data collection methods, it helped us capture more complete travel patterns with fewer overall survey participants. So we see here the metrics for the 2025 survey that was just completed versus the project that we completed a little over a decade ago. So while the 1,163 count of households and the 2,305 persons are roughly 1/3 of the numbers collected in 2014, you'll see that the number of person diaries and travel day trips in 2025 are 1/2 to 2/3 of the 2014 study. And this is largely due to the data collection improvements that have been made since 2014. So in the next few slides, we'll provide the 2014 data as comparison to the 2025 results. And I do want to point out that there are a few considerations as we make these comparisons. First, there are a few key methodological changes since the study was last conducted in 2014. In 2025, we collected multi-day travel surveys, which is supported by GPS-enabled instruments that allowed for passive location-based data collection. In 2014, the study was primarily conducted via a single-day travel diary and based on recall. So this meant that in 2025, we have a better representation of short discretionary and non-mandatory trips since a lot of these were collected via the OurMove smartphone app. So as a result, the changes we see in travel behavior from 2014 to 2025 may reflect both real changes in how people have traveled and may also be due to the improved way we collect and report travel. So we should keep these methodological changes in mind as we examine the results. We had participation in the survey across all age groups, which helps to make sure that the results represents the AMATS region. Compared to 2014 and 2025, there were fewer participants in the 45 to 64 age range and slightly higher participation in the oldest age cohorts here, age 65 and older. Next, we'll look at the trip rate, which is the average number of weekday trips taken on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday by an AMATS resident. So on a typical weekday, people made about 4.5 trips per day. And you see the 2025 results are represented here in the golden bars, 2014 results in the blue bars. Larger households make more trips, which makes sense, and adults traveled more than children under the age of 18. And on average, you see that there were more trips made in 2025 versus 11 years ago when this study was last conducted. Next, we'll take a look at the breakdown of how people traveled on a typical weekday by age group. We see that most trips, so nearly 90% of trips, are made by car overall. So that's all populations. And you see that those car trips are split pretty evenly by high occupancy and single occupancy vehicles. And the next highest reported travel mode was walk, followed by bus and school bus. When we look at these trip mode distributions by age, we see that there are distributions are pretty similar among the adults age group, so the 18 to 64 age range, as well as the 65 and older. And then travel by high occupancy vehicle dominated trip mode among children under the age of 18. They also made more trips by school bus. The most common reasons for travel or trip purpose were to travel home or travel to work, along with escort and shopping. And we see the higher rates of escort, which is accompanying others. So think of it as a parent who may be dropping off a child at school or an after-school activity. So these higher rates of escorts that we see is likely due to the changes in data collection methods compared to 2014. All right. Next, the survey also asks about additional travel-related behaviors and considerations that could influence travel, such as telework. Over a quarter of residents reported that they teleworked at least once a week, and nearly 12% worked fully remotely. 1 in 5 or 20% reported that they were not employed nor seeking work. This included retirees, students, and caregivers, while the majority, 70%, were employed. Nearly 40% of households receive deliveries of goods or services on a typical weekday. And about a third of residents, 34.4% here, have considered purchasing an electrical vehicle, with nearly 10% of them likely to purchase one in the next few years. The 2025 survey also included questions to capture residents' input on safety and budget priorities. When asked about their top budget priorities, a vast majority, so 80.7% of residents selected fixing and maintaining what we already have as the top transportation budget priority. The other top priorities selected by 1/3 to 1/2 of the population were related to walk and bike lane and public transit access. With walk and bike lane access, the highest priority or higher priority among adults age 18 to 64 than adults age 65 and older. And there was no difference by age for public transit access. When deciding whether to walk, bike, or use transit on their daily travel, residents identified distance to the destination, winter maintenance, and the temperature or weather as their top 3 safety considerations. And all of these were selected by about 2/3 of the AMATS population. So thank you very much for your time today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
So it's very interesting data, and I look forward to maybe going back through the slides and digesting some of it. It's very interesting.
Yeah. One question that I have is, you mentioned the 2014 data was collected differently. Can you speak just a little bit to what it was like in 2014 versus 2025?
Sure. I'd say the one of the key differences is in 2014, residents provided 1 day of travel behavior. So it's a single day and they're reported for their household. In 2025, due to kind of the different methods of data collection that we offered, we could potentially collect up to 7 days of travel behavior for households. This was primarily due to the smartphone app that became available in those intervening years. And this is an app that households, the adults in the household would download, and during their travel period for 7 days, the app would detect emotion, because people typically travel with their smartphone, right? So it would be able to see that, oh, you've moved a substantial amount, so we're going to log that as a trip, and then they would be able to kind of prompt you. All right, it looks like you made a trip at this time. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? So it collected not only more more days of travel, but it was also based on prompted recall, because it would say, all right, we saw that you traveled at this time, please tell us about it, as opposed to with just a single online survey that it's not GPS based, so it's all dependent on recall. So for those, what we see is that we typically see a higher reported travel around things that are like mandatory travel, which are things like school and to work, because those are habitual trips and some things that you would recall pretty easily. It's those non-mandatory trips. So maybe you stop by a gas station on your way to work. That those are things, because it's not mandatory nor not a typical part of your travel behavior, maybe easier to miss and thus may not be captured fully in that type of recall survey.
Okay, so some of the trip rates might be because of the different methods. Like
That's
on
correct.
that slide where it goes up basically 5 trips to the 5+ household, or half a trip for the one. So some of those changes might be because of the methodologies.
That's correct.
It's helpful. Other questions or comments?
We need to extend time because I have another question.
We still have 5 minutes.
Okay. I have a question for Bobby. There was a map that showed a blue area and it said no vehicle. Could you explain that again?
Yeah.
Just briefly?
Yeah, Yumi, can you go to slide 7? Yep, so this is the sample plan. So the blue is basically block groups where at least 15% of households identified as having 0 vehicle ownership. So these are 0 vehicle households. They don't own a vehicle in these households. And this is where in the block group, 15% of the population from the Census Bureau identified as a 0 vehicle household.
15. Right?
15%.
Yep, 15.
Did not have a vehicle. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yep, and these are typically we want to oversample these populations because they are typically transit dependent. And so when we go to later build the travel ban models, we want to make sure that we have a really good enough sample here to segment the population into the 0 vehicle segmentation profile so that we get robust transit modeling when we go to model this behavior. So in the AMATS travel demand model, there's 3 primary market segmentations that are specifically based around vehicle ownership. So there's auto sufficiency level 0, which is a 0 vehicle household. Then we have auto insufficient households, which basically means that the number of vehicles is less than the number of workers in the household. And then we have auto sufficient households, which are where the number of vehicles in the household is greater than or equal than the number of workers in the household. And that type of segmentation ensures that we get really good spatial accuracy on the different travel markets in the region based off of vehicle availability. So we want to make sure that we get, the transit group modeled correctly. And this is one of the ways that we do it.
Thank you, Bobby.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions? Okay, are there any comments from the public? Perfect. That gets us through that item. Thanks so much for the presentation. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll move then to item 6B, roadmap for AMATS. Is there any informational item there?
Nope.
We kind of covered it with.
I think the boundary is the big focus right now.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes left. Are there any committee comments? Item 7.
I was just going to mention briefly a public opportunity to the comment. STIP amendment number 6 is now open for public review. That posted today. It's open through August 2nd.
Okay, for the next month. Perfect. Other committee comments? Happy 250 years. Gonna celebrate that on Saturday.
I don't feel 250.
Drive safely. I know that around holidays often are some of the more dangerous times on the roads, so everyone will please exercise due caution and be mindful of others around you as well. Traffic safety moment for the day. Any other committee comments?
PME has a new staff member starting July 20th. Kiona Bundridge. Forgive me if I pronounced her last name incorrectly. And she is going to be our new project administrator supporting our federal funded projects.
Thanks.
So she'll be working with Tanya Hung, Rob Kinnaird. Nice to have her on board.
Exciting news. New staff, it's always exciting. Okay, let's see, are there any public comments? 30 seconds. Okay, not seeing any public comments. That puts us to adjournment. And so I will call this meeting adjourned at 2:59.
Thank you.
1 minute.
Minute to spare.
Wow.
30 seconds, 15